exactly have plans for how many videos I'll be putting out. Obviously, I usually would have put out a couple by now, but I'm gonna get as many as I can to you this month, and I'm trying to pick out something extra spooky for Halloween. So if you have any ideas, definitely hit me in the comments down below and let me know what you'd like to see. So I have a solved true crime case for you this evening. Not necessarily spooky, it just happened on Halloween, so I've been saving it for Spooktober time. This is the case of the von Richthofhen family murders. Dawn was breaking over the city of Sao Paulo one March morning in 2017. A 39-year-old resident of the South Side woke to a text from her next-door neighbor. "I think there's someone in my backyard." Some of the most affluent neighborhoods in the city are located in the South Side. Sao Paulo, however, is a metropolis with all of the pros and cons that come with it. And when it comes to surprises such as these, no one is safe. Police had already registered an increase in breaking and entering cases in the area, so the officers who responded to the call were not very surprised by what they had found. At least, not at first. The trespasser had skin as dirty as his clothes. His body was covered in scratches from jumping the fence, and he looked at them in fear. He refused to give them his name, and officers found out that most of what he was saying didn't make any sense. "You don't want to know about my life," he said, as clarity seemed to straighten his thoughts. He told the police that he had mistaken that house for his own. After an ambulance drove the man to Campo Limpo Municipal Hospital, the police checked the address to the man's house, which was about 2 kilometers away. They found not only a mansion, but they were nearby the site of one of Sao Paulo's grimmest crimes. At the hospital, staff found a jewelry box in the man's possession. It contained one golden medal engraved with the surname that had become known all over Brazil in the wake of the aforementioned crime. However, this box had not been stolen. It belonged to him. I'm just looking up something really fast because wanted to make sure that I got... Okay, sorry, I just wanted to look something up. It belonged to the man, Andreas von Richthofhen. October 31st, 2002, authorities received a call regarding a possible robbery in the rich neighborhood Campo Belo in Sao Paulo. Alexandre Boto, the first officer on the scene, found 13-year-old Andreas, his older sister Suzanne, and her boyfriend Daniel Cravenos on the sidewalk in front of the mansion. The siblings told Boto that they had arrived home at 4 a.m. The lights in the house were on, but the threat of facing their angry parents changed into a different type of fear when Suzanne noticed that the front door was standing open. The two of them went inside anyway. Andreas first checked the library that his father used as his office. The windows were open and the room ransacked. Shocked by the sight, Andreas forgot that this room was equipped with a panic button, and instead of activating it, kilometer project was estimated to be completed in 2022, totaling 2 decades to complete the enormous project. While studying at the University of Sao Paulo, Manfred met Maricia Abdallah. Originally from a small town, Maricia scandalized her Lebanese family when, in 1966, she decided to move to the capital to attend med school and specialize in psychiatry. Where Manfred was described as well-humored but introverted, Maricia was extroverted and the most popular member of the Richthofen clan. People who knew the couple said that their differences completed each other. Together, the two finished their studies in Germany, where they lived until Manfred received a job offer back in Brazil. The two returned to their home state and settled down for good. The couple's first child, Suzanne, was born November 3rd of 1983, and 4 years later, they had their second child, Andreas. The children, like their parents, were educated and spoke multiple languages. Friends and employees of the family said the siblings had a good relationship. They never fought, and a friend of Suzanne's said that the two of them protected one another. By 2002, Manfred's paycheck at Dursa was estimated at 11,000 reals, and Maricia started her own private practice. Her monthly earnings were estimated at 20,000 reals. I believe I'm saying that right. Yeah, that's how it looks. That's what I looked up. The family lived in a mansion estimated at 400,000 reals, equipped with a pool, a large yard, but they rarely threw parties or even had people over in any way. Neighbors said that from the glimpses that they sporadically got from the Richthofhen home, they seemed like any other family, with all of its virtues and defects. That Halloween morning in 2002, Boto and another officer entered the mansion. They found Manfred's office in disarray, as Andreas had described. However, every other room on the ground floor of this mansion was completely in order. The two men made their way upstairs to the bedrooms. The first was a messy girl's room, stuffed animals tossed on the floor, the closet open and searched. The second, a boy's, one of his hobbies displayed as a model airplane hanging from the ceiling. The room was in order except for the 3 pillows under the covers to simulate a sleeping person. Standing at the threshold of the third room, under hallway light, officers saw Manfred's body on the bed. His lifeless hand seemed to reach for the weapon that was laid on the ground next to him. Upon closer inspection, officers found that the brain matter splattered on the headboard belonged to the second body on the bed, Maricia. She had a wet towel stuffed in her mouth, and a jar of water with no glass was sitting on her nightstand. Still on the scene, Boto eliminated the possibility that Manfred had done this to them, because they had not been shot. Okay, let's see. Alright, I'm sorry, I just hit the wrong button. But they had sustained multiple blows to the head with an unidentified object. So Detective Boto is unsure of how to tell these two teenagers that their parents had suffered a painful end. So he asks 21-year-old Daniel to break the news. He watches as Daniel hugs the siblings. They huddle and whisper to themselves. Andreas breaks free from the group and starts pacing on the sidewalk in shock. Suzanne comes up to Officer Boto and says, "So what do I do now? What's the procedure?" Boto seals off the scene, calls an ambulance, and Homicide Department of the SPPD. By the time forensic expert Ricardo Salada got to the scene at 7 a.m., the media circus was already roaring at the gates, desperate for any piece of information. 2002 saw in Sao Paulo alone 12,535 registered murders. But this was different. A once-in-a-lifetime story. A brutal murder of a prominent rich couple in their own beds. But when Saldalla's team got the call that morning, they were told that they were entering the scene of a robbery followed by a murder. After entering the house, however, the team saw what Officer Bodo had noted before finding Manfred and Maurizia. The office, I can't talk, oh my gosh, my dog is barking and I'm worried that it's distracting you. The office and the 2 bedrooms had been searched, but the rest of the house was in perfect order, as if organized with a ruler, Saldella said. It looked like a model home, like no one even lived here. Upon further inspection of the scene, the details began to paint a clearer picture of the crime. The jewels that littered the couple's bedroom floor were Maurizia's cheaper pieces that would not sell for very much. The only tampered part of the closet was a shoe rack, where behind a false back, Manfred kept the pew-pew that laid next to his body. Manfred suffered blows that broke his ribs, and he sustained an injury to his skull that killed him almost instantly. Maurizia's fingers were crushed, showing that she reacted to at least the first blow to her head. Forensics determined the time of death to be between 10 p.m. and 12 a.m., and that if either Manfred or Maurizia had been attacked first, the other would have woken up, so there must have been 2 perpetrators. Forensic expert Ricardo Saldalla said, "The scene talks. You just have to speak the same language. We could see that whoever committed this crime knew this house because their MO did not match that of a burglar." While forensics swept their home, Andreas sat at the police station, coiled and visibly shaken. His glassy eyes stared into a void that threatened to swallow him whole. That night, he had not only lost both of his parents, but also his best friend. Like his father, Andreas was an introvert, described as a polite and intelligent young man. Every night he would wait for his father to get home so the 2 of them could talk about their day. At the family ranch, the 2 shared a hobby of woodworking, and they cared for the garden together. And as confusion and grief grew inside Andreas, his older sister Suzanne leaned on her boyfriend's shoulder and took a nap until the time came for the siblings to give their statements. The day before the murders, Suzanne told Andreas she was sneaking out with Daniel to celebrate her 19th birthday at a motel. She offered to take her brother to an internet cafe as his share of the celebration. Their parents were early sleepers, and they were already in bed by the time their children left the house. Around 10:30 p.m., Andreas placed 3 pillows under his covers and snuck out. Daniel picked him up and headed back to his house where Suzanne was waiting, and where Andreas kept a secret from Manfred and Maurizia. A mobilette that he bought and maintained with Daniel's help. Andreas and Suzanne each received an allowance of around 2,000 reals a month, and while Andreas had saved most of his money and managed to purchase his own motorbike, Suzanne often used hers to buy a gift for her friends and boyfriend, Daniel. Suzanne drove the gold VW Gol her parents had given her as a present, and Andreas followed on his bike. Rides like these, along with secretly smoking marijuana in the backyard of the mansion, were pastimes that the siblings 3 a.m., the couple went back to the cafe and took Andreas on a joyride before ending their night. He got to ride his bike through the city avenues with not a care in the world. They dropped Daniel and the motorbike off at his house and arrived back home sometime between 3:55 and 4 a.m. During her statement, the officer who spoke with Suzanne noted that she had no questions regarding what would happen to her parents' bodies or who was in charge of their funeral. Instead, she asked how soon she could sell the family cars and if she and Andreas would be allowed to take a trip to the family's vacation home in Portugal in the next week to cool their heads. After giving her statement to the police, Suzanne told the officers, "I want you to find the people who did this to my parents, and I want you to hurt them." And then she turned to Daniel and smiled. Investigators who spoke with Andreas, however, believe that he knew more than what he was saying, or that he was covering for someone. As sweat ran from his forehead and tears from his eyes, the officers continued to aggressively remind Andreas of the brutality of what had happened to his parents, and that if he had anything to do with it, he would have to pay for it. After repeating the same story again and again with nothing new to add, Andreas tried to tell the officers about his sister's relationship with Daniel. The romance between the two was the most recent cause of tribulation in the Richthofhen home. So we're going to back up a little. On a sunny Sunday afternoon in August of 1999, the 4 members of the Richthofhen family went for a walk at Park Ibra Pubera, where Daniel Cravenose was flying one of his model airplanes. Andreas was the first to approach Daniel, interested in learning more about the aircraft. Suzanne, however, was interested in the man himself. Manfred and Maurizia agreed to pay for Andreas to attend classes on building and flying model airplanes with Daniel. 2 years older than his sister, Daniel quickly became an older brother figure to Andreas, taking him biking and kart racing. The Richthofhen siblings eventually met Daniel's brother Christian, who quickly became a close friend as well. 16-year-old Suzanne made the first move by asking her little brother to deliver Daniel a note. The two started a relationship, and soon enough, friends of the couple started noticing a change in behavior in both of them. The two hardly spent time with anyone other than each other. They often spent their nights in motels, smoking and experimenting with other illicit substances. Andreas never stopped being a part of their relationship, though. They took him on joyrides, they taught him how to smoke, and even snuck him into a motel once so the 3 of them could smoke together. Daniel made his living off building and selling the model airplanes, maintaining them, and selling parts. At 1,400 reals a built aircraft, Daniel would, on average, sell 1 or 2 models per month. His brother Christian, at the time, had a history with illicit substance abuse and was still indebted to some dealers. 6 years older than Daniel, Christian had already been to rehab to treat his addiction, and he had served as a police informant. Oblivious to the couple's intimate life, Manfred and Maurizia believed the relationship was just a fling. They were wrong, and their daughter's relationship with Daniel not only lasted, but grew stronger and stronger. The first time Manfred and Maurizia were truly upset is when Suzanne blew off her own high school graduation party to be with Daniel. In 2001, Suzanne graduated from a bilingual German high school, but she failed to get into USB law, one of the oldest programs and largest law libraries in the country. Manfred and Maurizia then decided to transfer Andreas to a better high school as to guarantee his enrollment in the university of their choice. Suzanne enrolled in the family's second choice of school, the Sao Paulo branch of the private Catholic University, PUC. And there, Daniel would become a visits to places like the Sao Paulo Court of Justice. In order to maximize his time with Suzanne, Daniel skipped his own model airplane lessons and Brazilian jiu-jitsu practices. The boy littered his walls with pictures of them together and even got a custom pillowcase with her face on it, which is creepy if you ask me. The little mementos, Daniel's new clothes, the motel stays, and eventual loans started weighing ever heavier on Suzanne's bucket. Despite her allowance, she started asking Manfred for more money he knew would be spent on or with that boy. By the end of 2001, Manfred and Maurizia were already preoccupied with Suzanne's lack of interest in her schooling. And then they found out about Daniel and Christian's history of illicit substance abuse and tried talking their daughter into breaking off her relationship with them. Instead, Suzanne began lying to her parents, telling them that she was spending the night at her friend's house when she was actually at Daniel's. And it worked until one night in April of 2002 when Maurizia called Suzanne's best friend's house to find out Suzanne was not there. The next morning, when the young woman walked into the house to find her parents waiting to confront her about her lie, once she came clean, Manfred and Maurizia forbade Suzanne from seeing Daniel altogether. Their relationship with their daughter would never be the same. Defying her parents' decision, Suzanne stayed at Daniel's house and pulled away completely from her family, where before she spent whole afternoons just goofing off with her mother, she now fought her parents every time Daniel came to the house. When Mother's Day rolled around the following month, the family decided to have lunch at a nice restaurant to celebrate. Suzanne refused to go. The argument soon grew into a fight that ended with the eldest child cursing at her father and Manfred slapping his 18-year-old daughter across the face. This was the first time he had ever raised a hand to his children. The young woman stormed out and claimed she would never come back. However, she came back later that night, not wearing the ring Daniel had given to her to wear on her left ring finger, and she told her parents that their relationship was over. Oh goodness, the family celebrated, but Andreas knew that this was a lie. In July of 2002, Manfred, Maurizia, and Andreas took a month-long trip to Europe, and Suzanne chose to stay home. During that time, Daniel moved into the mansion where they got to live their forbidden romance away from the Richthofens' reapproving eyes. It was like a dream, said Suzanne, and by the time her family returned, their relationship was no longer a secret, and Suzanne asked her father to buy her own apartment. Manfred refused and told his daughter to work for her own money and use it to buy her own place. In early September of 2002, the police received a call to the Richthofhen mansion. They arrived to find Manfred in his house clothes and flip-flops having a yelling match with 21-year-old Daniel, and Suzanne trying to calm both of them down. The police managed to separate the two men, who walked away mumbling threats at each other. Manfred reportedly said he would break that kid. A calmer Daniel explained Manfred threatened to beat his daughter if the couple did not break up. This was the third time police had been called to the house to break up or prevent a fight between the two men. Twice earlier that same year, Suzanne had tried sneaking Daniel into their house at night, and every time Manfred stopped them and fighting ensued. On November 21st, 2002, after the deputies in charge of the case, Dr. Sinta Tukundavia, I know I messed that up, visited the Richthofhen house. Once inside the mansion's tall gates, she rang the doorbell and waited a long time in the yard. When Suzanne finally came to the door, it was clear she had been at the pool, where she and Daniel were celebrating her 19th birthday. Cigarette in hand, Suzanne showed Tukanduva the family home. The guide, like a guide in a museum on a monitored visit, the deputy remarked. Suzanne showed the deputy to Manfred and Mauritia's room and informed them that she had already gotten rid of the mattress because it was dirty. You think? As days passed, investigators kept finding inconsistencies with Suzanne and Daniel's statements, and the couple were asked to return to the homicide division on the request of investigators multiple times. During one interview, Suzanne recalled seeing a briefcase on the floor of her father's office that had been cut open. She told investigators that this was where her father had kept a large amount of money in reals, American dollars, and euros. And she recalled the exact total amount that was in the briefcase. Oh, hold on. So sorry. Goodness. Forensic expert Ricardo Saldana was the one who found the briefcase the morning after the crime, and he had only found the rip in the leather once he picked up and handled the briefcase. At this point in the investigation, it was clear that the culprit must have been someone who knew the layout of this house. Suzanne recalled a maid that had threatened her parents in the past and an old fight with a family friend as possible suspects, but both were quickly cleared by investigators. Not only did they lack a reasonable motive, but neither one of them knew the house so well as to leave it so organized after robbing it. 1 week after the murders, police received a call from an auto retailer who told them that on November 1st, someone had purchased a motorcycle and paid in American dollars. Because this case was so recent, everyone in the city, if not the country, was following every development. The seller had made note of it and informed the police. The buyer was Christian Cravenos. Investigators suspected that Daniel's father might have been involved in this crime, and they were about to call him to be interrogated alongside his son and potential daughter-in-law. Christian's extravagant purchase, however, caused investigators to drop their suspicions of his father and earned him, his brother, and the Richthofhen siblings yet another trip to the homicide division to be questioned separately. Convinced that at least one of the 4 young suspects was involved, Deputy Tukanduva took to her office to write up a preemptive arrest warrant. But before she finished typing the document, one of the interrogating officers knocked on her door and said, "We got them. It's over." Christian, who was interviewed by 2 veteran homicide detectives, broke and confessed first. Daniel, unable to keep the story he'd been telling straight, soon confessed as well. Suzanne was last to give up the lie. With that, the trio was promptly arrested, and a few days later they were taken back to the Richthofhen family mansion separately to reenact the events of that night. Sometime in late September or early October, Daniel had approached his brother and told him of his and Suzanne's plan to murder her parents, and asked him for help in committing the crime. Christian didn't give his brother an answer right away, and up until October 30th, was unsure if he was going to take part in their plan. Daniel reminded Christian of his share of the profits and told him to think brothers and gave them the okay. To prepare, Daniel and Suzanne had watched a true crime TV show, and the brothers copied the criminal's ensemble of medical gloves and stocking caps as a way to avoid fingerprints or DNA at the scene. Using the hallway light as a guide, the brothers walked around to either side of the bed, Daniel on Manfred's side and Christian on Mauritia's. The two raised their weapons and brought them down hard on the sleeping couple multiple times, denying them any chance of defense. Once the beating ceased, a snoring sound filled the room, the sound coming from Maurizia. The violence of her injuries had likely sent her into a deep coma, and the sound was probably what is described as a death rattle. Scared and frantic, Christian took the face towel from the couple's bathroom, covered her face, and doused her in water before finally putting the towel in her mouth. Some people believe that Suzanne provided the jar that was left on the nightstand and that she was in the room while Christian did this to her mother. Puzzled by the marks on the victims' heads, investigators asked Christian what they had used to bludgeon the couple. He revealed that Daniel had used pieces of a metal closet frame to build hollow bars like square tubes, and then filled them with the same soft wood that he used to build his model airplanes. According to Suzanne's confession, after she sent the brothers upstairs, she sat in the living room and covered her ears. She later said, "I didn't want my parents to die, but there was nothing else I could do. It was too late." When the brothers came back down the stairs, she asked them if it was over. They confirmed that it was and moved on with their plan. Daniel and Christian placed their clothes and the weapons in a garbage. Can't type, so it looked like garage. Bags provided by Suzanne. They trashed the couple's bedroom, stole some of Mauritia's jewelry to try to sell the robbery story, and they tossed Manfred's gun next to his body to insinuate that he was trying to protect himself and his wife from a robber. In Manfred's office, Suzanne used a knife to rip the briefcase where she knew her father kept 8,000 reals, 6,000 pounds, and 5,000 US dollars. The couple used this money to pay Christian for his involvement and left the scene. They disposed of the garbage bags in an unknown location, none of which have ever been found. Suzanne and Daniel dropped Christian off at his apartment and then drove to the motel where Daniel was sure to get his receipt. They stayed a couple of hours, consumed one ham sandwich and one Coca-Cola, and then left to pick up Andreas. During the reenactments, Suzanne never spoke unless spoken to and only spoke to the officer filming her as she apathetically went through the motions of this crime. Daniel's reenactment, however, had to be interrupted once the 22-year-old entered the couple's room and saw the officer who played Manfred bared a striking resemblance to the victim. Shaking and crying, Daniel asked for a break, during which he and officers prayed. On April 5th, 2006, Suzanne, accompanied by her lawyer, gave an interview to the Sunday night program Fantastico. In the interview, Suzanne shares photos of her family and friends and said she had nothing but hatred for Daniel, who destroyed her family and destroyed everything. At 22, her long blonde hair had been cut short with bangs that covered her eyes the entire time. She completed her look with a pink Minnie Mouse shirt and bunny slippers. She can be seen holding on to her lawyer like a shy child would try to hide behind her father, not knowing that before the cameras rolled, the microphones were already on and captured her lawyer instructing her to cry. The interview aired on April 9th, and the very next day, Suzanne was put in jail to prevent her from influencing or muddling the trial to come. 3 months later, on July 17th, 2007, 2006, the eldest Richthofhen and the Gravenose brothers walked into the courtroom, each facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and each with a different story. Suzanne claimed that the plotting and execution of the crime was entirely Daniel and Christian's plan. Christian, on the other hand, denied any involvement whatsoever, claiming he had confessed to try to get his little brother, who he's now accusing of double homicide, a lighter sentence. He said that his only involvement was to try to talk them out of it. Finally, Daniel claimed he was used by Suzanne to act on her plan to kill both of her parents and inherit their fortune, and he did it because he loved her. After the presentation of the evidence, the court heard love letters the young couple exchanged. Daniel, again shaking and crying, had to be removed from the courtroom, while Suzanne, sitting not too far from her partner, showed no reaction or emotions at all. On July 22nd, 6 days after the trial began, the trio was found guilty of murder in the first degree of Manfred and Maritzia von Richthofhen. Christian received a sentence of 38 years and has since confessed, again, to the murder of Maritzia. Suzanne was sentenced to 39 years in prison and Daniel to 39 years and 6 months. Since then, all 3 have been granted semi-open sentences, meaning they're free to work during the day and must return to the jail at night, which is beyond bizarre to me. It's just crazy. Suzanne never answered any of the letters that Daniel wrote to her after their sentencing. He himself has changed his name, gotten married, and returned to his passion of building and flying model airplanes. On her end, Suzanne was briefly married to a woman named Big Sandra, serving time for her involvement in the kidnapping and murder of a 14-year-old boy. 15 years after her sentence, Suzanne received a call from her younger brother, whose voice she didn't even recognize at first. Andreas was 29 years old and had earned a PhD in organic chemistry by then. During these silent years, he'd filed a complaint against his sister for harassment, probably related to a dispute over the inheritance Andreas received after his parents' death. Speaking to his sister on the phone, he agreed to meet her for lunch. Suzanne anxiously awaited, but Andreas never showed. En route to the encounter, he started to think about why his sister had done what she'd done, and he turned around, and, as far as we know, has never spoken to Suzanne again. He fell into the common trap of remedying his trauma with illicit substances. Suzanne was advised not to attempt any further contact with her brother. The infamous case added even more weight to the German surname and proved too heavy for Andreas to carry around the streets of Sao Paulo. After being released from rehab in 2017, Andreas left Brazil. Suzanne and the case are still relevant today. Puzzled by the brutality and coldness of the crime, the Brazilian people still watch her interviews, buy books with her mugshot on the cover, and provide an audience for the 2 movies about the case released in 2020. Facing another 2 decades incarcerated, the last Richthofhen in Brazil will one day walk free, forever condemned to side looks and whispers. That's the girl who killed her parents. So thank you so much for joining me here on my channel. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And like I said, if you're still watching, please let me know what you'd like to see for Spooktober.